memorials here. So these have the names of men and women who died either during or as a direct result of the First and Second World War. Obviously we've got a lot of veterans here who died in 30s, 40s, 50s and so on, but these are the ones who died really during the war. And you'll see a lot of different names on there. There's a lot of very interesting stories. I was kind of alluding to some of them, people like Anne Connor, you know, that I mentioned previously, and various others. And we started kind of looking at those stories individually, and we noticed a lot of very interesting stories. But one that really, I suppose, caught my attention was a man called Jared Nealon. Okay, so Jared Nealon, he came from a family that was very much pro Home Rule. His father was a big supporter of Parnell, who's buried just over there, under that very large boulder, and he was one of those who joined up, you know, in that big rush of recruiting. And what happens is that because you've got so many people joining, is that naturally enough you have to invent or make up new units that could house these people. So one of the new battalions of the local regiment here, the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, was the 10th Battalion. And what happens is they are mostly new recruits. The vast majority of them have no prior military experience, but Jared Nealon does. He is commissioned, he's given a temporary commission as an officer, and they're all training. They're training in the Royal Barracks in town, which is now Collins Barracks, where the National Museum is. And what happens in 1916 is that they're still training. A lot of these guys are expecting that they're going to be going off and serving on the Western Front or Gallipoli or wherever the case may be. But what happens is that the rebellion breaks out. And the British Army have very few feet in the ground. So what they tell these men to do is that they are to go and to march into the city centre and to try and quell whatever's happening. They probably didn't quite have a handle of exactly how serious this was going to be. So they do that, and the first group goes out. So you know, if any of you know where Collins Barracks is, they marched out onto the quays there, just at Backwall Place. Yeah. But the Irish volunteers on the opposite side have anticipated that this will probably happen. And they put a group of men under the command of Con Colbert in the Mendes City Institute overlooking that position. And as soon as those men came out onto the quays, they opened fire. And one of the first bullets hits Jared Nealon, and he's killed instantly. And the men drag his body and they bring him back into the barracks, and sometime later he's brought up here to Glasnevine and he's buried in the family grave. Now the remarkable thing about Jared Nealon is that his brother was also fighting during the rebellion, but his brother was fighting on the opposite side. He was fighting with the volunteers a couple of 100 metres up the quays. And it's incredible really, I think, when you look at those two brothers and you see the position that they're in 1914. You've got one who's pro-Home Rule, very much pro-Home Rule, and then you've got the other who is, you know, obviously looking for a form of independence for Ireland, but a much greater form of independence. And I don't think in 1914 they're that far away from one another, you know. They have their differences, but they're not that far away from one another. And because of the chain of events that occurs between the end of 1914 and the start of 1916, you have two brothers who are in very different places. And up until recently, you know, you would have looked at those two and you would have said, well, you've got one British Army officer killed during the rebellion and the other a 1916 rebel. His brother survives. He's sent off to Frangach as an internee, and he is later released, and he died during the emergency. He went back in to the Irish Army during the emergency during the Second World War, and he was brought up here to Glasnevine for a military funeral, and he was buried in the same grave as his brother, the next burial that was in there. So I always think that's interesting, you know. He had the full military funeral, shots over the grave, the whole lot, and I'd say nobody who was actually at the grave that day, or apart from the family, would have known that the person buried in that grave prior to him had been killed in the 1916 Rising with the British Army. So it's one of those stories that gives you those insights, I think. I was talking about that a little bit in the museum. It's one of those stories that gives you that insight into that period.
Didn't the Lamass family had three sons?
Yeah, that's right.
Two,
yeah.
Yeah.
One was killed. Over there. Yeah, it was common enough. Like we were talking there about Michael Malone, William Malone, Amy Cant's brother was killed at the Somme a couple of months after he was executed. You know, this was we were talking, you know, we alluded to that, you know, this was the thing, like we were saying, if we were all presented with a scenario, we'd probably all end up making slightly different decisions or different choices for different reasons in a lot of cases, you know. Yeah.
Like you asking the question of why we became involved in the World War I society, and we were doing like a spider diagram, and the amount of different things that came up.
Huge,
you know,
yeah.
reasons for people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is, as you say, you know, we're like there's a multitude of those reasons. You know, it's not always politics. It can be just, well, it's a job. It can be a bit of adventure. It can be all these things, and this is what you see in all of these stories. You know, is these different reasons coming through. You know, and it gives you a great insight into it, and it gives you a real sense of it, I suppose. So that's Jared Nealon. The large cross you see behind as well, it's just on the other side of the screen walls here. That's a cross of sacrifice. That was unveiled there. Somebody may have seen it last summer. On the 31st of July, the President Michael D. Higgins and also the Duke of Kent came here and unveiled that. That is a cross. You see them around the world. They're in all different cemeteries where dead of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission are buried. And this one is the first one of its kind, made out of blue Irish limestone, and it was a very big event that we had here to mark the centenary of the outbreak of the war. And one of the interesting things about it is as well is that the main kind of 1916 monument that we have here in the cemetery is the Sigerson Monument, which is just at the entrance as well, worth having a look at. It's in the canopy itself. Is made out of limestone from the exact same quarry as that one there, so I thought that was kind of nice. And if you look at that monument as well, it's an incredible monument. It's well worth having a look at before you leave. Do you have any questions? Is everybody happy enough? Yeah.